In the kitchen today, we have Dr. Regina Belski from La Trobe University's emerging research focus area, Food for Life, Health and Performance. Hi Regina, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Welcome to the show. Now today we are cooking Lupin banana bread, right?
Yes, that's right.
So for those playing at home, what is Lupin?
Lupin is actually quite a unique legume grain. So it's actually like a little bean, and Australia produces over 80% of the world's lupin crop.
Really?
So we're quite lucky in Australia to have this unique, I guess, legume grain, and it's very different from standard flour when it's ground down because it's very high in protein and fibre.
Brilliant. Great for the nutrition side of things as well.
Absolutely.
Maybe. Brilliant. So for the recipe, what do we actually need?
Okay, so the main things that we need are ripe bananas.
Okay.
Now here you will see that they are quite different degrees of ripeness.
Yes, I was just going to question you on this one. This one looks like I found this in a dumpster or something.
Yes, and believe it or not, this is actually the perfect one to use for banana bread.
Okay, and what else do we have here? So we've also got this looks like a cup of...
Yeah, these are sultanas, absolutely. And the beauty of this particular recipe is that it doesn't use any added sugar or any added fat. And so unlike some of the commercially available banana breads, this is quite distinctly different in that it doesn't contain any of those ingredients. And anyone that's tried to bake before, often the first three ingredients you want are sugar, butter and flour. Well, this particular recipe doesn't have the first two, so it doesn't have any added sugar and it doesn't have any added butter or other fat.
Brilliant, because you're getting the sweetness pretty much
absolutely,
from
this and the bananas.
Yeah. Now this is quite an interesting sort of flour here. Now I presume this is the lupin flour?
Yes, that's right. So as you'll see, it's a little bit yellow, so it'll also give the banana bread a little bit of colour. Now if you are not able to get your hands on lupin flour, you can just substitute the lupin flour for self-raising flour, or alternatively as well, if you are thinking about cooking a gluten-free version of the recipe, you can either substitute for gluten-free self-raising flour, and if you have access to lupin flour is also gluten-free. So it's a pretty good flour to have.
Brilliant. Well, it's great that we can substitute here just in case. And lastly, we've got half a cup of...
self-raising flour.
Just normal self-raising flour.
That's
right. And then lastly, we have... is it bicarb soda here
That's
as well?
right, and we only need about half a teaspoon of that, and that's really just to help with the raising of the lupin flour, just to give the banana bread a little bit more air. But also don't forget the eggs.
And the eggs, of course.
That's right.
So we're only using 2 eggs here?
That's right, only 2 eggs.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's get cooking, let's get started. So what's the first thing that we actually need to do?
The first thing we do is mash the bananas.
Brilliant, that sounds like fun. So we'll grab something.
Well, I usually just use a fork in my kitchen.
Fair enough.
That can make a little bit more of a mess.
Sure, okay.
Absolutely. So all we do is we peel them back,
Great.
and you will see that this one will be quite mushy and yucky looking.
But
this is the best type of banana for banana bread. So definitely do not feel that that is not good.
So in terms of looking at the same two, people just probably screw their noses up at that one.
Yeah, they might even throw it away. Well, actually, that's the one that's going to give
it.
you maximum flavour. So if you've ever had a really amazing banana bread and never been able to replicate it, half the time it's because they've actually used quite properly ripened bananas. And what you'll see is when you go to mash this one,
Brilliant.
the fork will slide through it really easily. And when we
Yes.
try to mash some of the others, it'll be much harder.
Yes, well, we'll just try that in a few minutes here. Now, Regina, you actually specialise in things like sport and nutrition.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So by training, I'm a clinical and a sports dietitian. So a lot of my research time, it will split between, I guess, different domains, but one of those is sports nutrition. And really, we look at the moment, I'm looking at elite athletes and trying to maximise and optimise their performance through eating. And looking at both the general diet, because that's kind of the basic fuel that they use, but also at particular nutrients in certain amounts that might be beneficial.
But let's go talk a little bit more about this lupin stuff, because this lupin flour, the whole lupin thing, this is what you're also looking into as well.
Yeah.
And how does that relate to that whole sport nutrition side of things too?
So with lupin, we originally started looking at it, and you'll see it is much harder to mash these bananas that are not particularly ripe compared to this first one.
Yes, this one obviously you can see that it's...
That's right.
Yeah.
So with lupin, the research actually began in Western Australia. And specifically looking at the fact that lupin was high, so we identified that it was higher in protein and fibre. And so originally it was looked at to see if it could optimise heart health. And there was some really good research that I was involved in, and there was other research that's been done by other teams that's actually shown that it is beneficial in regards to things like reducing blood pressure and other improving other heart health parameters. So it's pretty fantastic from that perspective.
Yep.
But the big advantage from an athlete's perspective is the fact that athletes are constantly looking to increase their protein intake. And the beauty of this particular bean, and when it's ground down into a flour, is the fact that it actually ends up being quite high in total protein as well.
Okay, so really, I guess, loading up on that protein side of things.
Well, protein is important, and of course carbohydrate is also important depending on the type of sport that you do. So the benefit here is that if you use part Lupin flour and part another flour in your cooking, then you're getting a really healthy mix.
Okay.
And it's also really high in fibre, and it's quite hard to get something that's actually high in protein and high in fibre at the same time.
So we've kind of gone through, we've mashed up the banana.
That's right.
Now.
Now, if you've got some chunks through there, that's okay. You'll just have a little bit more texture in your cake.
And texture's great. I think it's quite nice. Visually, and also, I guess, tasting-wise and texture-wise, it's a pretty nice.
So right now, you'll see this doesn't look particularly attractive. But as you will see, apart from this and the eggs, we actually don't have any other wet ingredients. So recipes will often, as I said, use either an oil or a butter as a wet ingredient, or they might use a milk or a water. This recipe does not contain any other wet ingredients.
So this will help with the whole binding of the whole recipe.
Exactly right, this and the eggs.
Okay, so with this...
Spoon it in here.
Brilliant, let's get that in. That's it.
The beauty of this recipe as well is it doesn't have too many ingredients. So it's not like you have to have a pantry packed with stuff in order to make it work.
Precisely.
Got banana all over the workbench.
Precisely. No, it's okay. We'll clean that up. A good kitchen. It's a great kitchen. So let's. So what's the next thing we need to do?
Next thing is eggs. So we just need 2 eggs for this particular recipe. So we can just crack them straight in, and you can use the whole egg.
Nutrition-wise, eggs, good or bad?
There's been a lot of misconception in the past that eggs are a problem in regards to cholesterol and heart health. But actually, if we look at all the recent evidence, it's pretty clear on the fact that having a few eggs here or there, or even up to sort of 4 to 6 eggs a week, is probably not a big problem.
Okay, great.
So once again, the evidence does get added to, and at the moment,
eggs are good.
That's what it suggests.
I'm going with that. Now, anything else in this at the moment?
Yep, so what we add to the wet ingredients are the sultanas as well. So you can substitute other dried fruit if you like. So if you're more into the sort of your dried cranberries or apricots, you can certainly incorporate those instead of the sultanas. But these are beautiful Australian sultanas, so they taste absolutely fantastic.
Great. And that's all we need at this stage?
Yes, so we mix those together, and after those are well mixed, we add the dry ingredients.
Okay. So in terms of your research, going back to that, Regina, what are some of the key findings you've had in your research of late? Anything particular that sort of has come out or come through that's quite interesting?
We've spent a bit of time recently looking at the general nutrition and sport-specific nutrition knowledge of athletes. And we found some very interesting gaps. And some of those gaps actually are around how much protein and carbohydrates they should be eating. And there's a very common misconception that athletes only need a lot of protein. And for many, many sports, what they forget is that the key fuel that the muscles actually use is a carbohydrate. So the protein is a building block of muscle, in other words, the actual solid mass that is built, but the carbohydrate is the fuel that it uses. So it's really important to have a healthy mix. And so there's a lot of gaps in knowledge in regards to that. That's what we found in the elite athletes we've been working with.
Now, is this mixed through?
Perfect, absolutely.
So what do we do now?
So the beauty is, it's literally this simple. Now we throw in the dry ingredients. It depends how much of a confident mixer you are, whether you throw them in all at once or you go bit by bit.
Let's go bit by bit.
Bit by bit. So we can start with the Lupin flour. We'll throw that in. You can sift these if you want a slightly lighter or fluffier cake, but at the moment we're just throwing it in. These are pre-sifted flours, but it won't be as lumpy if you sift it in.
Okay, so it's an optional extra, I guess, if you want.
That's right, if you've got the time and the energy, absolutely.
Okay, let's just get this in. We can mix this through.
Now, for those of you watching, you won't be able to smell, but with Lupin, it has actually a slight nutty type smell. So when you do add it, you will smell this very, very light nutty type smell to it. And one thing that is important to know about Lupin is actually part of the legume family because it's a bean. And it's in the same family as peanuts. So for those people that do have a severe peanut allergy, it might be worthwhile avoiding lupin because it's from the same family.
Oh, of course.
You know, people can be allergic to anything. You know, there are people that are allergic to bananas. But at the end of the day, just being mindful of the fact that if there is something from a particular food family that you might be sensitive to, be careful if you're trying something new from that family.
That is a great tip, actually, Regina, because like the whole thing of allergies is a big thing.
That's right.
And
And so if you are in that group, all you do is you substitute that lupin flour for, you know, the same amount of self-raising flour, and you're good to go. And if you're not using the lupin flour, you don't need to add the bicarb soda.
Now, I've noticed it's that lupin's made that quite nice and yellow too.
It is. It makes a beautiful colour, and if you ever cook with lupin, whether it be muffins or bread, it'll give it a really, really nice golden colour.
Nice. That looks great. And so we're now putting in
Yes, well, I'll put in the bicarb because that's there for the lupin. So I've got a 1/4 teaspoon measurement here, so 2 of those. I don't have a 1/2 teaspoon measure there, so just lightly sprinkle it. You don't want to overdo it with bicarb because any of you that have ever done that accidentally in the kitchen will note that you will get a very soapy tasting cake or bread. So always, you know, don't overdo it. That's the one ingredient you really don't want to go wild with.
Oh, I'm having bad memories of my chef apprenticeship days there. Now, let's have, what's the next recipe?
The next ingredient, it's a self-raising flour.
Brilliant.
So we throw it in.
Again, sifted if you really want that.
That's right.
Sort of smoothness. Brilliant.
So just spooning it right in.
There we go. So just into... Now there we go. So it all goes into there. Now we've heated the oven to...
Yep, so preheat the oven to about 180 degrees Celsius or about 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes.
In terms of, generally people know their ovens, so if you do have a faster or a slower oven, adjust accordingly, or really just check on it as you go along.
Okay.
We do want to just slightly neaten it up. And then that's effectively good to go in the oven. So you'll see how moist it is already. So we didn't need to add any other fluids. And the beauty with this particular cake in regards to this recipe, it is quite moist. If you like your banana bread a little bit more dry, then you can add a little bit more flour and that'll make it drier.
Okay.
I prefer it moist because then it'll stay quite pleasant and quite palatable for quite a number of days. It's also quite suitable to freeze. Okay. So if you make the little muffin style ones, then you can freeze some of those and take them out when you need them.
That's a great idea. So, in. Smells delicious, Regina. Now we've just let that cool just so it's easy to touch.
Yeah, just for 5 minutes, that's right. And so with the silicone dish you can touch it after a few minutes, unlike the metal dishes. And so all we do now is we turn it out onto the cooling rack to let it cool.
Sure.
So the simplest way to do it, with a silicone, it just slips out really easily.
Nice.
And then we flip it over and let the bottom cool so it doesn't become soggy. So let that cool a little bit and then it's ready to slice. And I guess the beauty is, if you do like to eat it warm, then you can slice it up pretty quickly and eat it straight away, or you can let it cool down.
So there you have it. Lupin banana bread a la Dr. Regina Belski. Regina, thanks for coming to the kitchen.
Thank you, Chef.
Oh, I'm not a chef. For more information on Dr. Regina Belski's research, visit the About section of the Kitchen Academic YouTube channel. A full copy of the banana bread recipe is available in the About section below.